Join me, Nina Lockwood, as I talk with people who express their creativity in ways that can inspire the rest of us to recognize our own creativity. Because creativity is not just the domain of a select few. It's who we all are. And if you enjoy these conversations, please like, subscribe, and share them. Thank you. Welcome to Creativity Conversations. This is episode 39, and today I'm with the lovely, talented Adey-Jones. Del, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Indeed. For those of you who haven't been on this call before, we have the opportunity to talk to different people from all walks of life who understand the nature of creativity, they embody it, and they share it with others. So I'm going to read Del's bio, although we all know that's just the tip of the iceberg, and we'll see where it goes from there. So Del is a 3 principles practitioner, teacher, mentor, YouTuber, blogger, mother, and host of insightful conversations. Thanks to her unconventional childhood growing up in the UK, which we'll talk about later, her former career in Hollywood, and her personal challenges, including a divorce and raising children as a single parent, Del's practice is informed both by the empathy gained from real-life experience and her deeper studies of spirituality and psychology. One of Del's specialties is helping people find the way out of codependency and narcissistic abuse through the understanding of the 3 principles. Using her relatable approach to coaching and her commitment to creating a safe space to explore the inside-out understanding, she continues to serve a wide range of clients both locally and remotely worldwide, which is the way we're all doing it these days.
Exactly.
And to learn more about Del's coaching and mentoring packages, you can go to her website at www.deladeyjones.com. So welcome. So nice to finally have you here.
Thank you. Gosh, you have such a beautiful voice. I was falling into that lull of a beautiful feeling just listening to you.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. There are probably people listening who don't know what the 3 principles are, and I wonder if you could just give us a short version of what it is and how you do your coaching and mentoring from that perspective.
Gosh, well, the 3 principles refers to the combination of mind, thought, and consciousness. And I'm going to leave it at that because I often joke that I wish Sydney Banks, who was really the man that had the enlightening experience and saw how the system works behind how we experience life. I often, wish he had called it something else, because people tend to think, oh gosh, 3 principles. What are the 3 principles to live by? Like, 1 less 4 agreements, or 4 less 7 habits of highly successful people. But so what Sid was pointing to was the fact that we experience life moment to moment via our thinking in the moment. And many of us, certainly in Western culture, are brought up to believe that everything we feel is a result of our circumstances and the people in our life, that the feelings are coming directly from them. And what the principles points to is that there's actually, our reality is created within us via our thinking. We feel our thinking. That was revolutionary to me for many, many reasons, because I think I felt very much a victim of my life and my circumstances for most of my life. So I was always running around trying to control everything on the outside so that I would feel better. So that was one of the main things I saw with the principles. And the second thing that was really life-changing for me, I think, was knowing that the thoughts in my head were not personal to me. I used to think that little sort of litany of beliefs I had about myself, that I was lacking or not good enough or damaged or defective or whatever it was that was going on in my head, I used to think that those thoughts were telling me something about myself. And when I came across the principles, I learned that that's not true. That's just the energy of thought just moving through me. And basically, those types of thoughts were up for grabs by anybody. I had just sort of, snatched a few of them and created this persona called Dell from those thoughts and thought that it was pretty solid. And that's who I was. So that's another thing about the principles that was really life-changing for me. And there's just so much more. The fact that we're spiritual beings having a human experience, not the other way around. And at that spiritual level, we are all created equal. Nobody is a little more spiritual than anybody else. We all show up a little bit different in the world of form, in our little, the human expression of our spiritual essence all is slightly different and wonderful. And I love that we all show up slightly uniquely different, but at our essence, the majority of who we are, we're all equal. So that was also a life-changing thing for me to see that, because I grew up feeling very, very damaged, less than, and not equal to anybody else. And I lived from that place for many, many years of my life. First 50 years of my life, put it that way. It's a long
Now,
time.
maybe this would be a good place to explore a little bit, if you're comfortable with it, talking about that unconventional childhood of yours that you mentioned.
Well, yeah, it was, it's so interesting. I mean, I used to sort of tell this story and people would be going, "Oh my God, you have to write a book," or "Wow," or things like that. And as challenging as it was in many, many ways, it was also, there was something really wild and exciting about it too. So basically, but that's also not to diminish the fact that there was also a lot of trauma and pain from it. But I was born in Wales in the UK, in the late 50s, 59 to be exact. And it was a very puritanical, what I describe a little bit of a sort of Bible thumping, chapel going, puritanical rural area. And my mother didn't fit in. She was I don't know how to put it. She definitely sort of danced to the beat of her own drum. And there was reasons for that. I mean, I think during that time, it was sort of, just after World War II, I think there was a very different feeling, certainly in the UK, than to here. When you've had a war on your land. Oh, sorry, my cat just knocked at the door there. So I think there was some, and there were other factors, the way she grew up and things like that. But anyway, my mother basically had an affair with my father for 8 years and had 3 children with him. And we never met my father. There was reasons behind that. He would visit my mum once a week, but we lived in these little trailers in our backyard. We had a little Welsh cottage that my mum used originally for bed and breakfast. And then at some point when I was about 5 years old, because it was seasonal, the bed and breakfast was seasonal, she had the opportunity to take in a long care resident who had been discharged from one of the local mental hospitals and needed care. So that was the beginning of many, many years of my mother doing that as a profession. She had to raise money there were 7 children in total. And so that's when I was about 9, she ended up renting this rambling old mansion and having a lot more residents that were, had mental handicap, disabilities and mental illness. So we lived in this rambling great old mansion. And my mother had this philosophy that, hey, they're just like your aunts and uncles, just, roam around the house, everybody's free. There was no separate living quarters. My mother actually had a separate living quarter, but the children didn't. We were all sort of interspersed around the mansion. And So it was really scary, to be really honest. It was very, very scary for me. Um, so that part aside, also having a father that just lived a couple of miles down the road and never acknowledged us, never came to see us when we were awake. So I never met him, literally, until I turned 30. And but I would pass him in the street. I knew who he was. My mother pointed out him to us and said, "That's your father." And um, but I just couldn't make sense of why he wouldn't want to, the word I use now is claim me as his daughter. So as children tend to do, you create a story that it's because you're not good enough, you know. So my story in my head was, if I was just pretty enough and more accomplished and clever enough or whatever enough, I had a laundry list of not enoughs, that he would have wanted me, you know, as his daughter. And unfortunately, and this is what's so crazy, this is, you know, when I was psychology, I studied spiritual psychology. I love psychology as well, as much as I love the principles. But that you can carry those thoughts with you through time and never question them. You know, I mean, as an adult, you know, as a young adult in my 20s, to still carry that belief that the reason my father didn't acknowledge me was because there was something wrong with me. I mean, now, now I go, hang on a minute. You know, no child, certainly a young child, could ever be that bad to not, you know, have a parent love them. It clearly wasn't the fault of a young child, but you just don't question that. Or
Yeah.
I certainly didn't,
Yeah.
you know, it just didn't make sense to me to question that. So that was part of my unusual upbringing. I also, pretty much, I would say those were the most impactful parts of growing up. Definitely feeling, you know, it's so funny, even saying it these days, you know, I sometimes use the words, you know, neglected, abandoned, and abused. And there's a part of me that goes, ooh, am I entitled to use those words? You know, because I loved my mother so much. I felt I was betraying her. But you know, when you look at it and you think, yes, there was abuse and there was abandonment and there was neglect, because, you know, really having, you know, your children be untended to in a situation like that obviously came with some challenges, put it that way. So
And yet, when you say those words now, pardon me, they seem to have a different ring to them, a different meaning for you.
mhm.
That you're not taking them as part of your identity. But you're right. What child does not assume that they're the cause of a problem with a
Yeah,
parent?
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just, you know, and I also think too, it's your survival as a child, you are depending on the adults to take care of you. So wouldn't it make more sense to make yourself wrong and make your parents right so that you could survive? You know, and then there's also the other layer of that is, if you think that the fault lays within you, then if you change yourself, you can hopefully have a different outcome. Whereas if it was the fault of a parent, you have no control over that. So I think as a young child growing up in that environment, it was like, well, if it's something wrong with me and I change myself and I work really, 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 really hard, I can have a different outcome here. And I think that is at the root of many, many people who get on the self-help bandwagon. It's that sort of, that's where it starts. There's something wrong with me. If I change myself, I can make other people happy, you know. So if we grow up in trauma, whether it's from an unusual upbringing as mine was, or whether you grew up in, you know, a household that had mental health issues or addictions or stuff like that, you often blame yourself, hoping that you get a chance to change the outcome.
You know, it's funny how the things that we choose to do as we get older may have that inadequacy as a base, and yet people's it's like we're two-sided, you know. We have the side that accomplishes things. Like you were an actor, you were a costume
No,
designer.
yeah, no, I wasn't an actor. I was too shy for that.
Okay, but you were in the acting profession.
Oh yeah, I was a
world.
costume designer. Yeah,
Costume design.
I worked in Hollywood as a, yeah, I was way too shy to be um, up on screen, but I definitely I loved creating. I loved making all my own clothes when I was younger. We didn't have very much money, so my mother would take us to what we call jumble sales in the UK, and I would and that was the other thing. That was the fun part of growing up with my mother. She had this wild streak in her that allowed us to express ourselves creatively. So I was sort of wearing 1920s sort of beaded gowns when I was about 11 or 12, and just really just crazy outfits. And I learned to sew. My mother was a brilliant seamstress, so I learned to sew at a very early age. And you know, really wanted to not ever look like anybody else. So I would create these outrageous costumes and she'd let me wear them. So
So you were expressing your true nature
yeah,
by
yeah.
dressing in all these exotic and
Mhm.
wonderfully wild ways.
Yeah. She used to call me a little magpie because when we would go to these jumble sales, it was like I had a, you know, they had these, it would be in church halls and the walls would be lined with these tables and then just piles of clothes stuck on top of them. And for some reason, my eye was like anything that was shiny or beaded, like the jet beads and things like that. So I just find these absolute treasures or sort of um, fox stoles. I mean, really weird things. So.
You must have developed quite a reputation as a result.
Yes. Yeah, anything to get away from the Catholic schoolgirl uniform I had to wear during the day.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
So, you know what I'm wondering is you are active on social media, you run several programs, you do coaching and you do mentoring. And how, with the understanding that you have now, how does that help you in working with clients, especially the ones that we mentioned earlier who have issues with codependency and narcissism?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, we are, you know, the sum of our experiences growing up. And I think just to go back a little bit, when I was a very, very, very unhappy teenager. I felt like I couldn't cope with life. I didn't, at one point, I actually didn't want to be here anymore when I was about 19. I felt like, and again, I wasn't even blaming life. I was blaming myself. I was like, there's something wrong with me. I'm not equipped. Other people seem to be managing this life really well, and I'm not. And, you know, and there'd been incidences of abuse, and I just was very, very unhappy. And I just so happened, well, I'll go back a bit. I had left home when I was 16 to go to art school. I was also, as I said, I was in a convent with nuns, and we had a lay teacher come in, and she was like, "Oh my God, you could go to art school right now and finish your education there," because I love to draw and paint. And so I left home at 16, went to art school, and did art, fashion design, and then I'd always really loved psychology. So that was always a pull. Do I go towards psychology or do I go towards the arts? And then I decided I was going to go back towards psychology. And around 21 years old, was given a free ticket to come to LA before I was due to go back to college in the UK for psychology. And so I came here, and I think I shared with you the other day, I was wearing this sort of outrageous outfit I'd made for myself, which caught somebody's attention in LA. And they were like, "Where did you get that?" And I was like, "I made it." And they were like, "Oh my God, if you can create and actually make the garments yourself, you can work next week in Hollywood." And I was like, "Yeah, really?" But that happened. I was given a call, and I started working immediately, even when I was on holiday. And so I never went back to do psychology. I called the college and I said, "I'm sort of having fun here." And they were like, "Enjoy your year. Come back next year. We'll hold your place for you," which was lovely. Well, it turns out I never went back. But there's always been this part of me that really has loved psychology. And I've needed to make sense of my life. So I ended up going into therapy myself for 30 years. I was also on a spiritual path. Again, it was like, I got to make sense of this. There's got to be a reason why I went through everything I went through. And all of that helped incredibly. It really did. It took me from barely functioning to functioning really pretty well. But I still had what I call codependent behaviors. I was a people pleaser. I was always negating myself to take care of others. I kept attracting narcissistic relationships. Low self-esteem, just so many of the classic codependent traits. And I became a coach, after the work I'd done and after the spiritual psychology I did. But I couldn't find the way out. I always say it was like I could work with clients and I would have you help them rather and feel seen and heard and understood and make sense of why they were behaving the way they were behaving. But I couldn't help them find the way out of that behavior because I hadn't found the way out. So when I came across the principles first in 2009, I didn't know it was called the three principles back then. So I just thought, I read a book called Stop Thinking, Start Living, which had an incredible impact on my life. But it was only really in 2015 that I really came across it again and understood that there was actually this huge community and that there were tons of teachers. And as I shared earlier, something happened in me where I started letting go. I really started letting go of this sort of codependent behavior that was constantly keeping me trapped in unhealthy situations. And how I showed up to life, how I showed up in the world. I mean, I was always settling for crumbs and, as I say, shy and insecure and riddled with, negative internal self-chatter. But the principles helped me incredibly. And so I was just like, originally when I came across the principles, I'd heard that there was no such thing as diagnosis and no such thing as personality disorders. So I was a bit like, oh, I can't share this anymore. And then probably about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, somebody asked to work with me. They'd heard I specialized in this area. And I was like, yeah, but we don't talk about that here. And anyway, she said it was life-changing for her. She was struggling in a relationship. And then I sort of thought, my God, why am I throwing the baby out with the bathwater? This is, it's the three principles help me overcome this, debilitating condition, really. So, maybe it is okay to talk about this, to have people that are suffering know that there is a solution and there is a way out of it.
Yeah. Well, it certainly makes sense in terms of the context in which people suffer.
Mm-hmm.
And what strikes me as really liberating, you might say, is that in terms of creativity, that our minds can take us to the heights or the depths.
Mm-hmm.
And it all depends on whether we realize that we have an option.
Mm-hmm.
That saying that suffering is an option.
Yeah.
Is that our minds are so amazing. And so much of our lives, for most people, they have exactly what you're talking about, all the negative self-talk, all the self-blame, not good enough, not enough in some way, and yet even that is a creative act, creating that identity. And then, we buy it until we don't anymore.
Until we don't.
But people do some amazing things, even though they're motivated by that kind of litany of things being wrong with them. And yet, once they turn away from that, once they realize it's not necessary to believe those things anymore, the saying, don't believe everything you think, then the energy behind what it is they're creating has such a different quality to it.
Absolutely. I love what you're pointing to because it's so true. I used to think, they said that thought in my head, I never knew that I did not have to believe that. I was under the impression that that was telling me about me, and I needed to change myself so
Mhm.
that I wouldn't believe that about myself anymore. I had no idea it was as simple as that's just, that's just like sort of energy moving through us.
Mhm.
And I remember when I was mentoring with the Pranskys, and I remember sharing with Linda about some of my insecure thinking. And I remember she had this look on her face, was like, yeah, why are you sharing that with me? And I said, well, because this is me. And she was like, are you serious? You actually believe that stuff? And I was like, and I get this sort of look of like horror, for want of a better word, across her face, really had me think for a minute. I thought, really? That's an option here? I just have to, or rather, I don't have to change my thinking. I just don't have to take it so seriously because it's not the truth.
Yeah.
That was so liberating for me. So all those years of, you know, striving and achieving to try and feel confident in the world, and because you're right, we can be motivated to do a lot of things to prove ourselves. But what happens is when we realize we've got nothing to prove, we don't have to do it like that. And that sort of relaxes. And then we get this burst of creativity, what I call creativity from wisdom, from deep within us that wants to come out. It's not this sort of hanging out in your personal thinking, okay, what next? What do I do next to prove I'm okay? Or to get, accolades or admiration or whatever it is. It's a very, very different. I mean, yes, it's creativity, it's always there. But with the sort of getting out of that personal thinking and just relaxing, it's just like the floodgates open, and it's just a whole different experience.
I totally agree with that. And I've had the experience of when I don't make something about me,
Mm,
this podcast, this painting, this dinner, if it's not about me, I can just enjoy the process of it. And that for me has extended to my own well-being, is that it's not about me, but it's about this energy, for me anyway. It's about this energy that wants to come through.
mm,
And what would happen if? And
yeah,
let's see, and let's explore this, and let's just find out. And it isn't anything to do about self-worth or
yeah,
um, people pleasing anymore. It's about, I wonder what's going to come through, what's going to
yeah,
happen next.
yeah. It's
And
so
there's
exciting.
such a freedom to that.
Yeah, I know exactly. Some people, when they first come across the principles, they have this fear that, oh gosh, if there's nothing to do, then I'm not going to be creative anymore. And it's the opposite. It's the absolute opposite. When we're up here trying to, strategize and think, what can I do next? What should I do? I find I just go in circles. But when I just relax and go, I know I'm going to be guided. It's just going to come through me. I've probably been more productive in my life than ever before, and I'm pretty productive. But once I stopped thinking I had to come up with things and just was hanging out in the
The
lovely
unknown,
anticipation,
perhaps?
exactly, the lovely anticipation of, I haven't a clue what's going to come forward, but I'm ready. It just was like, I mean, to the point, and I'm not sure if I shared this with you, but I just I have to have a word with wisdom, because wisdom for some reason loves to download at about 2 o'clock in the morning with me. And it's not, so I wake up at about 2, and it's not worry. It's just absolute. I start writing, I start painting in my head. I just all these, it's just this download of stuff that wants to come through. It's crazy. I'm just like, can you do it at like, can we like sort of reset that clock and maybe start at 7 in the morning, not at 2 in the morning? But I don't know. That's when it
That
wants to
there's a
come
very
through.
funny story which you may have heard, and I'm hoping I get the musician right. I think it was Tom Waits who was driving in his car, and he started to get the lyrics to a song, and he said, to wherever the source was. He said, "Can't you see I'm driving? If you, can't you wait till I get back to the studio? If you can," and this is butchering it a little bit, but
Yeah.
why don't you go bother Leonard Cohen, who was famous for taking 5 years, 10 years to write a single song?
Oh, that's too funny. Yeah, it is. And I think maybe it's because in the middle of the night, there's nothing on your mind. So maybe it's just we hear it clearer or something like that. I have no idea, but
But it's so
I,
common to wake up in the middle
Mhm.
of the night, and most people bemoan the fact that we do. And yet, if we can follow that impulse, then
Yeah.
it's not such a bad thing.
Oh, I just get up and write now. I just do. I write it all down because I used to think, oh, it's already in me. It'll come, it'll be there when I need it in the morning. And then I'd wake up going, it was a brilliant idea. I can't remember what it was. So I noticed that I go back to sleep a lot. And then also once I've written it down, um, I can just sort of, well, there've been nights, I have to be honest, where I've got up, I've written things, gone back to bed, and then more's come, and I've gone, oh my gosh. So I get up again, and I start writing again, go back to sleep, and occasionally it's been one of those nights where it's just, yeah, a few hours of that.
Right. There's
You know,
always naps.
yeah, exactly.
So, what do you
Yeah.
think the relationship is between creativity and spirituality?
Oh wow.
Make it up.
No, I was going to say, I think it's one and the same. I mean, um, we are spiritual beings, and we are, when we don't listen to that negative self-talk or that personal thinking, we are pure potential. We are pure creativity constantly. I mean, we can create every second of every day. We can have a new experience. So I think, for me, it's like, as spiritual beings, we are creation. We are creating constantly, whether we like it or not, whether we're creating stories about ourselves in our head, or whether we're creating art in the world, or whatever we're doing. If we're doing it with openness and possibility, I think there's always whether you like, I say that, I mean, I think regardless, there's something fresh and new every second available to us.
And so this might be a stretch, but let's go here and see what
Mm-hmm.
happens. With people that you've worked with who have been deeply traumatized by their during their personal history,
Mm-hmm.
how does that land when you make that statement that we can have a new experience every single day or even every single moment? For somebody who is totally identified with being a victim and being
Yeah.
abused for decades.
Yeah. Well, I actually, I always say I'm on the fringes of the three principles community, or I'm not a three principles purist, in the sense that I think that, in as we come into this world of form, as we call it, the physical world, I think that um, we have psychology. I mean, there people have patterns of behavior. And I think that, Sydney Banks said that life is a contact sport. And I do believe that our environment can push up us against us, it can batter us, it can bruise us. We know it can never break us, that one for sure. Who we are at our essence is, perfectly whole and complete, and never, as I say, broken or damaged permanently. But we can suffer from growing up in painful environments. So I'll never negate that did not have an impact on somebody. But I think that as young children, as I said, we develop coping mechanisms. One of them is, to hide, to not draw attention to ourselves, to play small, so we sort of limp through life with this um, coping mechanism. And so what I like to help people see is that, that might have been necessary when you were a young child to sort of fly under the radar or to keep everybody happy, but you don't have to continue that in your adult life. Or some children fear abandonment and their life depended on it, so they had to learn certain things. Well, we can't be abandoned as adults. We might be left, we might not like it, but we are self-sufficient. We cannot be abandoned. So I help people see where some of this thinking first took root in childhood, and that maybe that thinking was appropriate for back then, but it's not appropriate anymore. We can let go of it. And we can, as we were just saying, we are infinite potential. We can see ourselves differently in a second. When we know that, we are not set in stone, our personalities are not set in stone. Our personalities are made up of thought. So just like we've had thoughts of, I'm not good enough, I'm this, I'm that, whatever, we could equally so entertain thoughts of, you know what, I'm not bad at all. I'm pretty hot shit, actually. I mean, we could play with it, we can, I think, again, I grew up so afraid of making a mistake, so afraid of being shamed any further. And now I show up like, so what if I make a fool of myself? It doesn't matter anymore. Whereas when I was younger, it mattered so much. I was so protective. So I really help my clients see that they can be anybody they want to be. And it really is a playground. And, when you look at young children, they don't stand on the side of that playground going, oh, I don't want to play on that toy. What if I get it wrong? Life is a playground. We're here to play, explore. And the big thing for me too is what the principles points to is the separate realities. So once I saw that, I live in my own little, I use my Buddha, it's my favorite little prop, knowing who I am at my essence, that beautiful Buddha represents that spiritual essence of who I am. And then we all walk around in these little thought created bubbles. And before, it used to matter to me so much, do you see me? Do you like me? Am I okay? Now I'm just like, hey, I remember somebody buying me a book when I was in my early 20s. It was called What You Think of Me Is None of My Business. And I remember being given this book and I thought, what a stupid title. Of course it's my business whether you like me or not. But now I see that, yeah, I can't control how you think of me and what my job is to answer to myself. My job is to live authentically. I believe I have a really good guidance system within me that has me operate from a loving, kind place, but not a self-sacrificing place anymore. Not a place that was dependent on your approval. I don't have that anymore. So I really try and, I love working in this area. I work with lots of different people in lots of different areas, but when in the area of low self-esteem and codependency, I just know what's possible. I just know how dramatically my life changed. And so I have so much hope that if I could find it, anybody can find it, because I was pretty entrenched in my, negative belief about myself. So,
Well, a question came to mind as you were
yeah,
talking, which is how do you see the difference in terms of it not being our business what other people think of us, since we can't control that
yeah,
anyway? So, what's the difference between arrogance, authenticity, and inadequacy?
yeah. Well, I think inadequacy comes from when we're in that personal thinking where we live in comparisons and judgment and fear and lack and scarcity. That's sort of happening here. From our essence, none of that thinking can happen. Who we are at our essence, that beautiful spiritual being, we're just sort of basking in that beautiful place of peace and love and oneness and respect. And so, like I said, just because I accept that I can't control how other people view me or see me, doesn't mean that I'm going to become selfish and arrogant and entitled and dominate and control, because I would be back up here living from a place of fear and whatever, that painful personal thinking. When I reside in that place of loving connection and knowing we're all one, I have absolute, I am the authority of myself. I have a standard within me that which is, whether it's being authentic or have whatever you want, words you want to use, but I have a standard within myself that I like to adhere to, you know, um, or just be. I mean, my son often says to me, why are you so loving? Now, years ago, I would have been loving to hopefully have you love me back. These days, I'm just loving because I love living from that place of loving. It feels so good to me. But there's a difference. It's like that to me is living from my authentic self. Before, it was coming from I was manipulating, controlling, you know, I'll be loving to you if you love me back, that sort of feeling. So I don't know if that answers your question. So yeah, I used to be outer referenced and now I'm inner referenced. That I would say is the big difference for me.
I wonder as you're sharing this that for many people, and again, this is a choice, a creative one, even though it may not be in the direction that is the most positive for us, but that so many people, when they are feeling inadequate, and I've certainly had many of those moments, turn outward to acquire something and to achieve something. And yet, it seems like the real solution is an inward turning.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about achievement or acquisition, but it's really about getting a glimpse of that infinite potential that resides in us. Because if we really knew that and could hold on to that idea for more than a minute, even to say we were in any way inadequate would be ridiculous.
I know, exactly. It's as Dick and just said, it's the drunk uncle in your head. It's just talking nonsense. It's just it's just saying stuff. And for me, I was in that trap of more accomplishments will give me the confidence I'm seeking. More people that love me will fill that hole within me that is this bottomless pit. But as I stopped listening to this thinking that I was less than or comparing myself to others, so that was the only thing I had to do, was actually not listen to that anymore, not take it seriously.
Mm.
As I started changing that relationship with my thinking, I naturally settled down into who I really was. So I didn't have to go looking for it or finding it. I didn't have to do affirmations in the mirror and say, I love you. I started feeling what it felt like to come from that space within. And naturally, when you hang out there and you know that you're all equal and you're all one and you're all connected, it's sort of almost like tapping into, well, it's natural confidence, it's natural love, it's natural um, ease and peace and comfort. So it was so ironic. It's like I fell back into what was already there. It had always been there. I had just been distracted by my personal thinking, telling me a story about myself that wasn't true. So that's all it was. It was an innocent, being hijacked by this personal thinking.
Yeah.
So as I was like, oh my God, I don't have to believe that. And not to say that it used to be in the forefront of my here, like blocking my view of the world, how I showed up, everything. And then as I started to not believe it so much, it sort of moved to the side a bit. And then it sort of moved behind me a bit. And it was just like a little faint whisper. And it's not to say when I'm not in a low mood, it might sort of come a little more, into the foreground.
Yeah.
But when it does, I'm very aware of it. I'm like, oh, you're just old thinking. You just, I don't have to listen to you. You're just visiting because I'm in a bit of a low mood right now. It's a very gentle, I don't have to fight it. I don't have to grapple with it. I don't have to overcome it. I just know it's going to fade back into the background if I just leave it alone.
That's beautiful. I heard a colleague of ours recently say that she realized that she really didn't care what other people think. And then
Mm.
she had this moment of, and I don't really care what I think either.
That's so true. I felt the exact same thing when I started laughing about the title of that book. What you think of me is none of my business. I thought, yeah, and what I think of me is none of my business either. you know, not when
That's
it's
so
coming from
radical.
that place.
Yeah, that's such a radical perspective, and there's so
Yeah,
much freedom to that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I have another question for you. What do you think the
Sure.
relationship is between creativity and empathy?
Creativity and empathy. Hmm. Gosh, I could really sit and think about that one for a long time. There'd be a lot of silence. Creativity and empathy. Well, it's interesting. I mean, as I said, I think we are creation.
Yeah.
We are creation. So that is creativity in motion. And I think that when we really live from that place of love, knowing that we're all connected, we're all one. Yes, as I said before, I love the little uniqueness of our humanness, how we show up differently. But I think that when we really, really come from that place of we're all one, naturally have empathy for each other. We naturally care about each other. We're 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 not these separate beings that need to sort of, um, what's the word I'm looking for? That need to sort of grab and take and survival of the fittest. That's all coming from very insecure personal thinking that you're living in fear and scarcity. But I think when we are coming from that place of where we are all one, that creation, we naturally care about everybody
Mhm.
because there is no competition. There is no need to dominate and control. And even it's so interesting you to say that because I work with people that are recovering from narcissistic abuse, and one of the main traits of somebody that you know has narcissistic behavior is a lack of empathy. And I see them living in this world, my little Buddha again, this thought created world where they feel they need to dominate and control and bully and grab. And, it's a very scary world they live in. So I don't look at people engaging in narcissistic behavior as horrible, um, terrible people. I know at their essence, they are beautiful, beautiful spiritual beings. They just got lost in this world of thought, this painful world where they don't think that they can survive unless they are controlling, manipulating, bullying, and dominating. So I have a lot of compassion for them. In the past, I used to think that I had to sort of stay in relationship with them or whatever it was. Now I know that I don't have to at all. I can still have love and I can see their psychological innocence, but I don't have to self-sacrifice anymore. I can be over here and lovingly say, you have the same amount of resilience and well-being and wisdom within you. You will find your way. I don't need to sacrifice myself for you.
Mm.
So I, yeah, that's what came up for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it seems to me that from what you're saying and from my own understanding is that when we are in that space of empathy and connection, that a much more creative relationship can evolve from that than
Mhm.
if we see somebody be engaging in behavior that is somewhat destructive, and
Mhm.
rather than rolling our eyes and just stay
Yeah,
away, is to be able to recognize something deeper about the other person,
yeah.
so that instead of responding in a very habitual defensive way, something else is possible.
Yeah, and I think, and I think there's degrees. I think that there are, we can always see the psychological innocence of everyone, including ourselves. We are all doing best we can, moment to moment, given our level of consciousness. But I also, especially in the work that I do, I see that some behaviors are more damaging than others. And I think there's nothing wrong with stepping back and just saying, and holding a healthy boundary and just saying, I can love you from over here. I can love you, I can respect you, but I don't have to stay in ongoing relationship with you. And there's such a freedom to that, because I think anger and hatred can keep us, tied in a negative way to people. When I work with people, if there is the relationship is damaging, I can say, you can leave with love. You can absolutely leave with love. You don't have to get to the point where you feel that you don't love them anymore and now you can leave. No, you can leave with love. You can say, self-preservation, it's, this is the cost is too high for me to be in an intimate relationship with you, but I can still love you from over here.
Yeah,
So,
lovely. When you say that we're all one, what does that mean? What one what?
one what?
What does
One,
it?
for me, it's one beautiful pulsing energy of love is the only way I can describe it. I mean, that's what it felt like when I have hit those moments. I've had a couple of moments in my life where I felt like I was just pulsing, and there was no separation. There was this absolute, and there was two words that really come up for me that, and then they're inadequate to describe it, but were love and the most incredible peaceful calm. So that's what I mean by one. There was just, but again, I'm very much a believer that, when we say we're all one, as in we're all connected at that spiritual level, that spiritual energy that we're all sort of vibrating at. I definitely also feel that we are one, as I say, with our spiritual nature and our human nature. And feel very sort of, I think there's a reason why, as spiritual beings, we incarnate into this world of form. And I don't want to do a spiritual bypass while I'm on this planet. I want to embrace my humanity. I want to embrace everything that comes with that. And if I get caught up and I forget that I'm both, and I end up thinking it's just me, just my little me, Del, on my own up here, I have so much compassion for that. I don't judge it. I don't think there's something wrong with me. Oh gosh, I should have a higher level of consciousness. It's like, no. I mean, for me, consciousness is like a sort of an aperture of a lens. It's sort of, rather than levels of consciousness, I see it as there are times when for whatever reason I'm in a low mood, or life seems to be, pushing up against me, where I can get a little more contracted and I can just see through a narrower lens. And then there's other times when I feel more expansive and my awareness and my consciousness grows, and I'm very sort of, I just have a different experience of life. But I don't see one is better or one is less than. I just think it's part of the package of what it is to be human, to be spiritual, having a human experience. So I'm very gentle with myself when I'm having a very human emotion, like if I'm in a bad mood or whatever. I don't think, oh, there's something wrong with me, I've got to change that. I'm just like, whoa, this energy is moving through me really fast right now. And I just am at peace with whatever it is that comes through me, and I'll feel it fully. I had an experience once when I was in Peru where I really, had one of these experiences where I really felt, I knew that there wasn't one single thing that I could experience as a human being that was wrong. Not one single emotion. I don't believe for a second that any of us would have been created with the capacity to feel, what we might label as negative emotions like anger, rage, jealousy, gluttony, whatever it is. I just think that's just part of the smorgasbord of what it is to be human. And, especially talking about creativity, I mean, my God, it's like as I was an oil painter for many years, it would be like saying, oh no, certain colors and tones are not acceptable, cannot put those in your painting. To me, it's just like, gives me the variety to be more creative.
Yeah. I've heard it said, that's just so lovely. I've heard it said that we share our being, our beingness, our essence, and that is characterized by, as you say, as love and as peace and as happiness. And it's when we get that it's veiled, it becomes veiled by our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And which is not to say that that is bad, because it is part of life. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
game of hide and seek, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now you see it, now you don't. And yet all of it is who we are.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Yeah.
everything. We're the low thoughts, we're the high thoughts, we're everything in between. As you say, the whole smorgasbord.
Mm. Yeah.
And there are different, as you know, there are different traditions. Some that are more of the, excuse me, the monk perspective, where you leave the world so that you're not tempted. And
Mm-hmm.
yet another route is to embrace it all, because it's all can be a pathway to deeper understanding, which
Mm-hmm.
means more creative solutions, more brilliant ideas can come through because we're embracing rather than resisting.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And when you were sharing just then, I was thinking I used to actually, before coming across the principles, I was I um, was certified as a shadow coach, and in which we all know the shadow, Carl Jung, the disowned aspects of ourselves that we sort of shove in the dark and pretend don't exist. But what can happen with that is we end up projecting it on other people around us. We sort of, and so you can get really into some really sticky thinking if you're doing that. So when you actually, we can get very judgmental, how come they're displaying that behavior and things like that. But when you totally embrace the totality of what it is to be human, you just relax so much. And if you're relaxed with yourself, then you're relaxed with others. That embracing ourselves in our totality, yeah, it's this like you're gentle with yourself, and then again, as I say, you're less judgmental and gentle with other people. And what better way to show up in the world than with that capacity for love and understanding with yourself and others?
Especially these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So I know we're getting close to our wrap up, but I do have another question for you, which is,
Mm-hmm.
what do you see as the relationship between creativity and listening?
Mm. um, I live a very different life than I used to. I used to feel like I was controlled by my personal thinking. And I was pretty creative, or it looked like it. I was an artist, and I, was told I was really good and things like that. I was told I was creative. But when I stopped listening to that and I started being more aware of wisdom, which is so loud and clear to me. So I listen for wisdom now, not for my personal thinking. So it's really interesting. I used to think it's like I have this sort of like little child part of me, and I look up at my personal thinking. I always see it here, and it's like, you're not the boss of me anymore. It's like, my wisdom is the boss of me. I take my orders from wisdom. I listen to wisdom. So that's what it is. And that doesn't mean that I don't engage my brain, my personal mind, to sometimes implement some of the things that wisdom tells me I should be doing. but wisdom comes through with a very, in such a way that I go, really? That's what I'm supposed to do next? All right, then, I'm following you. You haven't failed me yet. So it's a really, that's what I hear with listening to myself, to who is really the authority of me, which is my wisdom, not this fearful personal thinking. And when I say authority, I don't mean it as in, maybe that's not the right word, but wisdom does not fail me. Wisdom is vibrant and alive, and it is creativity. It is our spiritual essence. So the more that I listen for that with less on my mind, the more fun life is. It really is. It's like Christmas. It's like getting gifts, you know. So
And do you think that I've had my own experience with this understanding and realizing that there is a freedom that's possible that eluded me for many decades. And it just seems to me that when we understand that our lives are fluid and our minds are fluid, that we can deal with change and upset and, the popular word pivot when there are dangerous situations or threatening situations, or even on the opposite side, things that are possible beyond our wildest imagination, is that when we have that understanding that nothing is written in stone and
yeah,
anything is possible, that applies to our own psychology as well,
yeah.
and the qualities of our life as well. And who wouldn't want that?
And it's all an illusion anyway, that we have control over anything. We are living in the unknown, whether we like it or not. Who could have imagined that we'd all be sort of in lockdown for a year, or having to, reinvent ourselves through the COVID times? And I always say, it's so funny. We pay so much money to be entertained. I do certainly. I want to listen to great books or read great books. I want to go and see movies, and it's like, please don't tell me the ending. I want to go for the ride. Yet when it comes to our own life, it's like, what's the ending? What's next? It's like, and it makes me laugh, because I think, my God, it's the only area where we get so controlling about wanting to know the outcome. Whereas with movies and books, we just are enjoying it. So I tend to try and look at my life the same way, as like, I don't know the ending. I don't know the plots and twists and turns that are going to occur, but they're going to be exciting, you know,
Mm.
hopefully.
That's gorgeous. So before we say goodbye, would you let people know what you're up to these days and where they can find you?
Yeah. Well, what am I up to? I coach. It's one of the main things I do, which I love. I hold different programs. I hold programs for codependency and recovery from narcissistic abuse. I also do. I'm in partnership with Andrea Valelli, and we do a women's mastermind, 8-week mastermind, that's just about to start happening. And that's just all about the principles, nothing about codependency or anything like that. And yeah, one-on-one coaching. And then I do my podcast YouTube show called Insightful Conversations, which might be going through a change. So very excited about that. I've had this inkling that this change has been coming for probably about 3 or 4 months now. And I was just very patient. I was like, wisdom, you are going to tell me what it is when it's right. I just knew change was coming. And then last week, I just had one of those 2 o'clock in the mornings, and it came to me. And so, but that's in the works, so I can't share that yet. But there will be a different podcast and a different show coming up in the next couple of months.
Wonderful.
I think that's about it. Oh,
And
and I'm writing a book.
oh, fabulous.
Yes. So, yeah.
So where can people find you? Will you tell us your your website address again?
Yeah, it's just deladeyjones.com. And yeah, you can contact me through that. And yeah, looking forward to meeting new people. I love what I do, and I mean, there's nothing more rewarding than when you see people just like unburden themselves of these shackles that they've lived within for most of their lives and just completely and utterly see what's possible with pure potential. I love that. And we really, really are. We can make up our lives moment to moment. So
Let's do that.
yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
lovely. Thank you so much again for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been wonderful. I really, really loved hanging out with you. It's been great. So thank you. Thank you for
Thank you so
inviting me.
much. Thank you. And thank you, everyone who's been listening or watching. We appreciate your being here, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you so much. Bye for now.